What's up, everybody? My name is Daniel Unmanageable, and welcome to Hard Knox Talks. So, tonight's guest, I told him before the show, I said, dude, you have to be politically correct, and you can't make anyone angry, or you can't come on. And he said, nope. And I said, fair enough. What's up, Jason?
Not much. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Good. Yeah, it's been a crazy week, but
Mm-hmm.
doing not bad.
I really dig the bricks, man. So, let's dive right in. What should we talk about tonight? How about, let's start at the beginning. You grew up in L'Orange, correct?
Correct, yeah. I grew up in L'Orange, and I spent my time basically split between the bush in L'Orange and my grandpa and uncle's farms down in the Blaine Lake, Marceline, Leask area. And so, I got a pretty good mix growing up. I'm mixed race. My mom's, full Scottish and Canadian, but Scottish heritage. And my dad's Dene and Métis. And so I grew up in two worlds, so to speak, and really got connected with the land growing up. And yeah, but L'Orange is definitely home. I think Saskatoon's probably overtaken it now, but get back up there as much as I can.
Yeah. And how old were you when you started seeing problems in your community with drugs and the lifestyle that goes along with it?
Pretty young. So growing up, L'Orange is a small town, and we lived in kind of a lower middle class neighborhood, and across the street from us, growing up my entire life, there was a house that dealt drugs, and so saw how things could go from a pretty young age. And my mom's a social worker. Now she's retired, but she was a social worker 30 years. And growing up, she always told me, don't judge folks, because you could be in that situation someday. And really that compassion, empathy aspect, she was really big on teaching me. And then my dad on the same side, my dad worked in corrections, and so I think he had a tough road to be Indigenous, and then eventually work his way up to running correctional facilities. But same thing, he always told me that you never know how life's going to go, and you could end up in that similar situation. And so I went to sweats with people in prison right from a fairly young age, and he taught me just because they're in jail doesn't mean they're anything other than a human being, and that we have to respect them and treat them as they are, which is an equal. And so but yeah, growing up, you saw drugs pretty prevalently. L'Orange is a tough town to grow up in. A lot of fights, a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs. And then of course, because we lived right across the street from one of the main drug houses in the town, you saw it really often and early. And I saw my first overdose, I think it was 14 or 15. It stuck with me pretty hard, especially because when the person was overdosing, nobody seemed to be helping. And even I just called 911, and that seemed to be more than what others were doing. And I thought that was a little crazy back then. And yeah, it just stuck with me really hard. And after that, I think it was also at that point in time where the rose-colored glasses start to come off, and you start to see and you start to experience racism. And it's not just, oh, that person treated me differently. It's, oh, that person is being racist towards me or my friends, or that person's being homophobic towards somebody. Or you just start to see the stigma rear its ugly head. And especially around addictions, you hear the talk, and it just didn't sit well with me right from a young age. And so yeah, it's just you learn that the conversations that happen about people living with addictions behind closed doors, and eventually when you start pointing out that that's not okay, they don't have those conversations necessarily around you. But yeah, it happens. And around that time too was when I got introduced to alcohol, and then a couple of years later drugs, and had a lot of anxiety and different issues growing up, mental health issues, some trauma. And so it was like a warm bath. I tell people, when first time I tried alcohol, and
you were home.
Yeah, I was home, and it really helped me ease a lot of the anxiety that I was having at the time. And, you know, I was a pretty violent kid. And, you know, it sometimes in sports and sometimes not in sports. And it was really hurting people was starting to not weigh too good on me. And I, you know, it just hurt people type of thing. And so, eventually, you know, I stopped being as violent as I was. And at the same time, I was still dealing with a lot of mental health issues. And, you know, it took me a while, probably 10, 15 years before I could really get a handle on that and really know what's happening there. But, you know, yeah, I was a functional alcoholic for a good chunk of my, you know, all of my teenage years, and then, you know, definitely all my 20s as well.
So before we get too far ahead here, a question popped into my head. With your mother and your father instilling these values in you from such a young age as to not be judgmental and to show compassion, do you contribute that to how you are showing compassion and supporting the community now?
Yeah, 100%. Like my parents.
Are they still like, do they still have a prevalent like presence in your life? Like, do you turn to them for mentorship and stuff?
No, I moved out at 15. And so, you know, we still talk often. I go vacation, like I go up hunting with my dad once a year, and they come and stay with us and stuff like that. But like they instilled those values in me from a really young age, and
It's stuck.
It's stuck, yeah. And I think also, you know, my grandfather was a very kind man. I had a lot of like I have bad ADD. You know, a lot of my cats, yeah, but I had a bad ADD and a lot of you know, just like I wasn't like a kid who did well in an environment where you had to sit still and mind your manners. Like someone argue, I'm still not good in those environments, but yeah, I didn't do super hot in those environments. My grandpa's always really patient with me. Same thing with my cookum, my grandma on my dad's side, and so that really instilled a lot of those values in me. And at the same time, like my uncle Dennis runs a ranch. He still does, and he was, you know, he always treated me like his own. And I think he saw how I was, and he had a really gentle hand at a time when I needed it. And you know, I think those farm values and the work ethic that comes with, you know, being all around a farm and being in the bush really, you know, they instilled the two things, you know, in me, which is, you know, the compassion, the empathy, and then the hard work. And I think those, you know, serve me well to this day.
Yeah. So you got into substances, you went down that dark path that so many of us have. What did it for you? Like what happened that you were like one day like, no, I'm going to turn this around?
Yeah. So like my dad, you know, for a couple of years before I even tried substances, was getting me involved with cultural activities. You know, I was a competitive jigger. I went to sweats, you know, I was learning how to trap and fish. And
What's a jigger?
Like Métis jigging. So like fiddle music, and you'd like square dance and stuff. So it's just the cultural, and I was in on a jigging group and stuff like that. And it really instilled in me these cultural values. And then there's just a time where I kind of decided I was already starting to get sick of it, and I didn't like what it was doing to my mental health. And, you know, like I was functional. I was top. The organization I was working at the time, I was the top employee for sure, and like I can work. And so, but my mental health was not 100% there. You had the stress of the type of work I was doing, and all that type of stuff wasn't good. And I just didn't like that I needed this, you know, crutch that was, you know, it was definitely getting me through the day, but I didn't like that I was so reliant on it. And I just thought I potentially could overcome this, but I had to do a lot of different things. And one of them was, you know, cut people out of my life if they weren't on board with what I was doing. Another was, you know, starting to eat right, dealing with my mental health issues, you know, whether it was through exercise or whatever. And so I just, you know, and then I thought back to a time when I didn't feel like that. That was probably the biggest thing. I thought back to a time where I didn't feel, you know, this crippling anxiety and this weight and this need to like constantly medically, you know, alleviate my mental health issues. And it was a time when I was really connected with culture. And so started re-engaging with cultural supports and, you know, and really getting my fitness stuff on track. And that really helped me. And I tell people, you know, maintaining sobriety is a moving target. You kind of always have to, you got your core supports, you got your core things that you do, but you got to be trying new things all the time because you never know when stuff's going to kind of get stagnant. And like, I like to keep busy. And so, you know, you know, what you're doing, it always needs to change. Now I do a lot of canoeing, and, you know, as long as I can get out into the bush, you know, 4 or 5 times a year, I feel much better. That's probably my biggest struggle right now, is being in southern Saskatchewan. There's not really the bush like I'm used to. And so I spend most of my money and time going up to northern Saskatchewan to vacation. And yeah, it does a lot of good for me to be on the water and be back in the land.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You say it's a moving target. I myself have found in my own recovery that if I'm not moving forward, I'm sliding backwards. You know, I have to be constantly evolving, you know, and maybe you could say I'm addicted to change now, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think you're always gonna be addicted to something.
Yeah. Well, aren't we all in a way, right? So, okay, time goes on, and you find yourself working for AIDS Saskatoon, which ultimately becomes Prairie Harm Reduction. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about the history of that organization and how the government funding for that organization has changed since you've been there?
Yeah, so the organization started in 1986, you know, through just a group of some small handful of community members. They got together because the AIDS crisis was going on, and they were seeing a lot of their friends and family die. And so they got together to really just help with end-of-life planning, some compassionate care, being with people in hospital, because this is like the height of the AIDS crisis, where like people wouldn't even touch somebody if they found out they had HIV. And medication wasn't available. And so it's just a group of community members who decided to make a difference. And, you know, they did really great work. And eventually the organization shifted over the years to working with, you know, predominantly men who have sex with men, queer population, to street involved population, especially as the HIV epidemic shifted here in Saskatchewan away from, you know, heterosexual sex and men who have sex with men to people who use injection drugs. And so, you know, that was probably in the late 90s, early 2000s that switch started happening. I didn't come along till 2013. And so, you know, a lot of people went into working at this agency to get it to the level that it was at. That when I came in, I was working in mental health in another organization, you know, working with adults with mental health disability or mental disabilities and like developmental disabilities, and, you know, helping them get stable in the community. And big thing that they implemented there was, you know, even though these are adults with mental disability, like mental or developmental disabilities, they still could make their own choices. And, you know, that's really served me well working in the addictions field, because I think that a lot of times there's infantilization about people living with addictions, like these aren't adults that can make their own decisions. And so I came over in 2013. I got recruited from a friend of mine who I used to work with at the old org. She was working at AIDS Saskatoon at the time, and she took me out for a drink and just said, I think you might be a good fit. I think you might be what we need. And so I came on board as the director of support, or the support services coordinator at the time. And, you know, I worked in that role for about 3.5, 4 years. And then last year in that role, I got made associate director, which, you know, it's typical nonprofit. You have multiple hats or whatever. And then spent that first number of years just trying to get our support services up to a really high level. And, you know, we had really good staff then, and we were small but mighty, and we kind of specialized in dealing with the people nobody wanted to deal with, and going into situations that everybody else seemed to think were very dangerous, yet we could get in and out with no problem. And so, I worked in that department for a while, and then eventually I got voluntold that I was executive director in December of 2016. Our outgoing executive director she was on mat leave, and she decided she didn't want to come back from mat leave. And so I came on board in December 2016. When I came on board, you know, we had just lost a big federal contract to do a bunch of HIV education. When the Liberal government came in, they restructured the way HIV funding worked across the entire country. And in Saskatchewan, they pulled money from us and All Nations Hope down in Regina. And everybody seemed to be happy with our work, but they said we're going in a different direction. And so that was so I came in, and we've been having a scrap for funding since I walked in the door. And I think, you know, at the time I was angry and all that type of stuff, but looking back, there's a lot of good lessons learned. And, you know, it was funny because, you know, 6 months later, the feds came back to us and said, we need you back, and we need you to help build up capacity in these orgs that we thought could do the work. And they were trying to do the work, but they needed some capacity building. And so we came on board, and that's exactly what we were hired to do, is capacity building within those orgs. And I think they're doing great work now. There's a steep learning curve when it comes to working with this population. You can't just say, I'm going to work with people living with addictions and then assume that those people are going to come access services with you. There's a lot of relationship building, trust building that needs to happen. And so, and at the same time, we have provincial funding for our outreach services. So we have our family support program that works with the highest risk families for apprehension in the city. We work to make sure that babies and kids don't get apprehended and they can stay at home as long as it's safe. Work very closely with the Ministry of Social Services. They're pretty happy with our work. We actually just opened up a youth home actually a couple of weeks ago because they asked us to on short notice, and so we said, sure, what the hell. And so now we have a youth home that we just started, and it's been going, touch and go for sure, but it's been going pretty good.
How many beds?
Just one for now. We're going to potentially expand out more, but we got one right now, and we're looking to potentially implement the second. We'll see how it goes. Mm-hmm. And then we got that program. That program works 9 a.m. till midnight, and we do a lot of advocacy and a lot of work, and our staff there work like dogs. They're really good. They're really solid with the families and that relationship building and then advocacy. And and the ministry works really closely with us. They rely on us, we rely on them, and so it's a good partnership between us and the Ministry of Social Services. And then our other program we had when I first started in Saskatoon, now Prairie harm reduction. When I first started in support services, we had basically 1.5 positions funded by the Ministry of Ministry of Health to do HIV work. And since then, we've grinded. Whatever they needed, we would do, and we're clearly working with a lot of people on our caseload. We have in that department anywhere from 800 to 950 people a year on our caseload. And these aren't the quote easiest to work with people. These are the people that get denied services all over the province and all over the city. And so, we grinded that one out, and eventually now we're up to I think 3 full-time positions, the director position, and then part of my salary. And so part of what we did with that one is we did a lot of policy work to save the government money. So, we co-founded Canada's National HIV Testing Day. We did the first Indigenous language condom campaign. We did provincial naloxone expansion, drug pipe. I don't know if it's a drug pipe policy and provincial needle exchanges. We wrote that. We also, Julia, who's our Oakland Director of Support Services, she led a coroner's inquest into youth overdose death in Kilburn Hall, where, a youth was denied medical attention for, I think it was close to 12 hours when they were overdosing. And so we had to, intervene because the government wasn't really doing anything. And so Julia really quarterbacked and pushed for that coroner's inquest. And, since we did the coroner's inquest, a bunch of recommendations were made and no youth have died in Kilburn Hall. And, and that's kudos to Julia and our support services department. And then on top of that, we rewrote the policy. It took us 5 years, but we eventually did it, where we rewrote the policy for people living on the SED program, so the disability program in the province. They used to only be able to make $250 a month, and there was big clawbacks and that type of thing. And it wasn't.
And there still are.
Yeah, but the program didn't really make a ton of sense. And so we worked for 5 years with the ministry, got on the committees we needed to, and then we wrote the policy. So now people on the SED program can make $500 a month. So we doubled the amount that they can make. And then on top of that, they can also annualize their income, because, when it snows, if you're in a wheelchair and it snows and you got to get to work, that might not be an option. Or if you have, seasonal depression disorder, how are you supposed to get up to your work when you're you can't, because it's the fall and that's the time you're super depressed. And so maybe you can only work in these windows. So that annualized income makes it so people can now work at optimal times and optimize their income. And that was a big policy win that we did for the province. And now we've done, the first safe consumption site in the province. Now it came out yesterday that we've opened up the first overdose prevention site in the province. At the COVID isolation hotel here in Saskatoon, thanks to the health authority. And that's not the COVID isolation overdose prevention site isn't the PHR show. Like, we work very closely with the health authority, the frontline staff, their leadership, and we were very grateful and honored that they came to us and asked us to be a part of that. And I think it just shows that the tide on the way we look at addictions in this province is turning. And even today, 20 minutes ago, the ministry just announced that they're approving 13 more overdose prevention sites at the COVID isolation hotels around the province. And so
what is it? Sorry to interrupt you, but for people that might not know, what does an overdose prevention site look like? What do you do there?
Yeah, so it's not too much different from a safe consumption site. So a safe consumption site, federally regulated, very stringent process to get approval. And so that's what we have at our 20th Street location, with no government funding for the overdose prevention site. For the safe consumption site. Overdose prevention sites are provincially regulated. So at the start of COVID, the federal health minister granted every province's health minister the ability to approve overdose prevention sites without federal approval. And so they're meant to get really set up really quickly to deal with the urgent public health need. And so they can look. I've seen overdose prevention sites look fancier than our safe consumption site, and I've seen ones that are basically a tent in an alley. And so in Saskatchewan, the safe consumption site or the overdose prevention sites, we have a digital platform that we can use to monitor people digitally in their COVID isolation suites, and then if an intervention needs to happen, they overdose, we can go in. But it's all run through support workers. That said, we do work very closely with the health authority, and so there are medical professionals on site if we need their help. And so, but an overdose prevention site, you don't have to have a medical professional in the overdose prevention site. You can have just peers running it. And it could be volunteer ran. It doesn't have to be paid staff. They're really, I think the best site in Canada I've seen pretty much all of them. And I think the best site is Sister Space in Vancouver. It's all a peer ran facility. It's just unreal. Like they have none of the bells and whistles, but they have the best ran site, I think, in the country. That's who we try to emulate often is Sister Space. And so that's who we based our overdose prevention site model. That's how we based our response plans in the consumption site off of is, the Sister Space, Dr. Peter Center, Arches in Lethbridge that used to operate in Lethbridge, and the Boyle Street in Edmonton. But like the Sister Space does amazing stuff. And so the overdose prevention sites, I think they're the way that sites are going to go. I think we needed to have a safe consumption site like ours in place. And I think when you're dealing with the intensity that we deal with, I think might need a safe consumption site, which is why we went that route. But if you're in Estevan, you don't necessarily need a safe consumption site. An overdose prevention site is probably going to better suit you, especially for the amount of money that you're going to be able to bring in or get government funding for potentially. Or if you're in Yorkton or if you're in Swift Current, Maidstone, wherever you're at in a smaller community, I think an overdose prevention site is potentially the way to go, because the safe consumption site is intense. And even just the public consultation process for a safe consumption site is no fucking joke. Like when we were doing ours, months of planning went into it, then 2 months of community consultations, where my job for those 2 months was just community consultations. That's all.
What's community consultations? So
you could do it anywhere from having a survey online. I think data can be manipulated really easily one way or the other. And so what we did was we knocked on every house in Pleasant Hill, every apartment building, every house we knocked on, postered. We did open houses. It took us 2 months, but we knocked on every house in Pleasant Hill, and part of that was to control who was providing feedback into what's happening in that community. We didn't want, some group out of Rosewood or something like that on the east side dominating the process. Pleasant Hill doesn't have a lot of say in what happens in Pleasant Hill, and so we went in there, we documented, are they in support of it, all the concerns that they had with it, their top concerns. We made plans to address those concerns. We feel like we went above and beyond, and my understanding is we did. It was a more thorough process than most sites have done in Canada.
And what was the outcome of that consultation, like out of Pleasant Hill?
Yeah, so it was 72 to 75. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was mid 70s in favor of the safe consumption site. And I think that that's because it's happening in the communities on the doorstep. We heard a lot of, yeah, that's my grandson is living with addictions, or my sister is, or my mom is, like we had it all over, and they're sick of seeing their family members struggle and die and not have a place to go. And on top of that, they're sick of seeing people use in public.
So, okay. Now, for the 20-some% that were not in favor of it, what were their concerns?
Yeah, so it was actually 15% opposed, 11% neutral. And
Okay.
so whatever that balances out to on the floor. But so the neutral were just like, we don't, like, they were just like, whatever, like, we're fine with it, or we're not, like, we don't really have an opinion
Sort
on
of detached from it.
Yeah, and then the 11% opposed, we didn't separate out their concerns from the people that were in favor, because even some of the people in favor said, we want it here. We have some concerns though. So the top two concerns were needles in the community, improperly discarded needles in the community. Okay, so what are we going to do about that? So we've invested over $150,000 in needle pickups in the last 2 years.
Where did that money come from?
Fucking good question. It wasn't from the fucking government, that's for sure. And so we had to go across. We ended up getting funding from the Elton John AIDS Foundation.
So we got a question coming in here. Sorry, I cut you off. What
so
did you say?
We got funding from the Elton John AIDS Foundation, and then we fundraised. And so last month, we didn't plan on running a bunch of fundraisers this month. We thought last month we were going to run a fundraiser that with the Kinsmen matched. We did it with in partnership with the Oguzhatawak Patrol Group. And the Kinsmen matched for up to $40,000 in funding. So we pulled in $82,000 last year. And so that's money to fund OPG's needle patrols this year, and a small portion for a drop-in center. But so we fund OPG, Oguzhatawak Patrol Group. They do their local needle patrol group, similar to Queen City Patrol in Regina. And they go around and they pick up needles in the neighborhood, and they do mental health engagements and hand out naloxone and do all the things that we need them to do.
What's a mental health engagement?
So like if somebody's in psychosis, they'll go talk to them and see if they need support, and then do a referral or call a support worker in, or bring them into our site, or do whatever.
Wow.
And so
okay,
they're kind of our street team. And then but now we've got the Kinsmen on board supporting us with that initiative, and so that's major. That
is major.
Yeah, and like last month we ran what we thought was the biggest fundraiser ever, and now this month it's like now we're running an even bigger one because of the lack of government funding again. And so that was the main concern, was improperly discarded needles. And then the other was community safety. People said they were worried about potential safety issues in the neighborhood. And so everybody said we should hire security guards, and security guards are a waste of money. To say like this, I'd rather have more mental health professionals, addiction professionals, peer support workers than security. And so, but they said they were worried about safety in the neighborhood. So we worked with Saskatoon Police Service, got City Council to endorse a community mobilization unit. They're street patrols, they're out on foot, they're engaging people day to day. There was one day last summer where just because we had them out on the street, they reversed 3 overdoses in like the span of 2 hours.
The police did.
Yeah, and we had them. There was another incident where we had somebody in the center that was in. We have on occasion we have other service providers that will just drop somebody off at our door who they're in some complete psychosis, either drug-induced psychosis or they they're actually just having like a mental health breakdown. And so we had somebody who came in and they were having a mental health breakdown, and we were trying to talk to them, but we didn't know who they were really, and it was hard to engage. And so we had to call the community mobilization unit in, and the police came and did that officer arrest them, bash their head in, do any of that stuff? No. What they did was they came in and they said they talked to the person, they asked them what they needed help with, and then they got them over to a mental health professional. They convinced them to seek out mental health support. So we're really trying to do things differently now, and we're working with the Saskatoon Police Service to do things differently. And that was one of their community concerns. And so the top two, we feel like we've addressed with a bullet, because 150,000 in needle pickups, and then having a unit dedicated to the neighborhood that's trained in mental health support. Tell me where that's happening in other places in Canada. I don't think you could.
Yeah, we have a question coming in here. It's about the overdose prevention sites. Could they be instituted in communities like throughout the province?
Yes.
What's okay? So the question that I have is, why is the government supporting the overdose prevention sites yet leaving Prairie Harm unfunded?
That is a very good question for the mental health and addictions minister.
But
they clearly show that the need's there. Otherwise, they wouldn't be having them in their own facilities. If the need's there in those facilities, there's no fucking way you can tell me that the need's not in the community.
Mhm.
You know, and especially for evenings, like I can't stress enough. Like we run during the daytime because that's all we can afford right now. So we're hopeful that, you know, by the end of this month, we're going to be able to expand into the evenings. You know, we'll see how the fundraisers go and that type of thing. But the sites are needed in the community, especially in Pleasant Hill. Like you can't tell me that the need's not there.
Yeah.
You know, and our location, you can't find a better location. We're right beside the Westside Community Clinic, the best medical clinic for dealing with this population. Saskatoon Tribal Health Council Health Center, you know, the busiest needle exchange in the entire province. So
when I was in the sober living house just down the street, I had to go to the Westside Clinic once a week to do a drug test. I did that every week for a year.
Yeah, those, like, fuck man, if you want to talk about working hard in high caseloads, Jesus, like those doctors, nurses, mental health professionals, outreach workers, yeah, grinders.
Yeah. So we never really answered Claudia's question here. We sort of skipped over it for a sec. So
like we could definitely implement them all over the province. The application to get them in place is pretty simple. We'd help you with the application if you needed help with it. And I think the biggest barrier for a lot of people is the policies and regulations. We got that shit covered. Like we can help you develop a policy manual. Honestly, it'll probably take us 3 days. Like we can get you up and running fairly quickly.
And in town here, you could do that. Like, why don't you just change it to Prairie Overdose Prevention Site?
Well, we want to be supporting other orgs to do like how we like NIWO, Yoten and Regina, the Friendship Center in Regina, who's opening. We want to support local organizations to start in on this work. So if there's a local orgs that are wanting to do it, we'll support them. If a community invites us in and says that they need a site there and the data shows that they need a site there, like we're going to go in for sure. But we would rather support an existing organization, you know, on site. But yeah, nothing's stopping these from popping up all over Saskatchewan.
So you say organize. Sorry to cut you off again. If I don't ask, I'll forget.
Yeah, we'll go.
So okay, you say support existing organizations. Are you saying that there are organizations that would have these opened within the organization? I'm thinking would Shaw Center have a what do you mean organizations? Who are we talking about?
So like if the Friendship Center is a good example. So they're opening up an overdose prevention site in their space. Like Queen City Patrol, like they could easily get a safe consumption or an overdose prevention site in a park in the North End in Regina. Like I think the biggest barrier for everybody is timing and staff. So we can help with the first one for sure. And I think we've shown that we can fundraise with the big boys, you know. And so you know, this next clothing line, one of our top seller, what we think is going to be our top seller, half of the proceeds that we get are going towards NIWO Yoten to give them a little bit of a shot in the arm to get up and running. And so we're happy to help people fundraise. We're happy to connect them with businesses. We're not going to do all the work for you, though. The org's definitely got to do the work, but you know, we can definitely give you a little bit of a nitrous in your engine. Yeah.
So yeah, you get a name like Kinsman standing with you. I mean, that they don't just give money to anybody, man.
No, they do not.
No, they do not. So okay, now in the news, now I have been admittedly detached from the news for a couple of days. I've been focusing on my studies and whatnot. But I remember hearing a representative from the government saying that Prairie Harm will continue to get the funding that they have gotten in previous years. Now that might be that is true, right?
Yeah.
Now the thing that I found interesting is that when you and I were having our conversation the other day, Prairie Harm has only been a safe consumption site since July.
October, in fact.
Since October. Okay, since October. Now the money that they are providing you is for all other services, and there is in fact zero money going to the safe consumption site. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So the funding that they give us is for our family support program, which that has nothing to do with our safe consumption site. And then the other is for our support services department, which provides case management to an already existing massive caseload of 800 to 950 people a year. And so that's what those programs for our language in our contracts very explicit, and so we don't have any money for the safe consumption site outside of fundraising dollars. And so, we got our merch line, we got our fundraisers, we run AIDS Walk. We've ran AIDS Walk with Out Saskatoon for years. This year we're bringing on not just Out Saskatoon, but it's Out Saskatoon PHR and Saskatoon Sexual Health. I think especially with the way the economy is going, we need to look at shared fundraising models, because it's very tough for orgs. One, like Out Saskatoon's doing great work. Saskatoon Sexual Health's doing great work. We're doing great work. We don't have a ton of administration capacity. It's usually one person at each of our orgs.
And so the community is stepping up.
Yeah.
Is that like?
Yeah, like Jesus, I don't even know what to say, man. Like, it brings you to tears when you think about all the businesses coming on board, people donating, like Bill's House of Flowers came by today and dropped off a check for like $3,500.
And it seems daily on Instagram, I watch you as I scroll by, and it's somebody else. Like, I think I saw 2 different posts today, $2,000 each. And then there's other companies that are selling a certain product that they're donating a portion of the proceeds, and they're selling out. From what I heard.
Every place we now have an official realtor, like John Ashenburner Realty is now donating 5% of all. Like if you build a house, buy a house, sell a house, 5%, and you use John Ashenburner Realty, we get 5% of his income from the deal. Like it's so crazy right now. And like this, I don't know, Saskatchewan, I've had job offers all over the country, and like I love Saskatchewan. I'm never leaving. But the reason I love this place is because of the people, the land and the people, like it's 1 and 2, and like the way the people of Saskatchewan step up. And a lot of times, we hear these talk and if you pay attention to the message boards, the trolls will make you think people in this province don't care about people living with addictions. Fuck, man, the last 2 weeks is showing you that people not only care, but they care with their dollars. They care with their businesses. Like, people are putting their business stamp behind our organization. Like that's huge. And they're not saying Prairie harm reduction in general. They're saying we are funding the safe consumption site. And like Borschke's Butchers, like they have a smoky for us.
I saw that
they sell for us. And like, I've gained 20 pounds in the last 2 weeks just from keeping up with the fundraisers. But like Dark Side Donuts, Amigos Cantina, Broadway Theater, like Saskatoon Pole Dance Studio. We have Pilates studios.
Line.
It's just this last 2 weeks, we went from being on the lowest to low, like where we didn't get provincial funding, and we were just like, what are we doing? And then before we could say anything, the community just is like, no, we got you. And they pick us up. And it's just like the Saskatchewan cares, and like a lot of times people act like Saskatchewan doesn't care about this issue. The last 2 weeks, in the last couple of years, we went from people telling us that we were going to bring about the end times to the neighborhood. Now people talking that we're, a core agency that needs to stay in the neighborhood, and people need to find us more funding. And it's because of the way we approach the addictions crisis, unapologetic, in your face, and factual and science-based. Like the Community Foundation has backed us through and through. United Way has backed us through and through. I just think Saskatchewan cares. If you're looking at the Humboldt Broncos crash, if you're looking at Telemiracle, this province really cares about the people that live here, and people living with addictions are no different. And I'm very excited for the next 5 to 10 years as to what's going to happen here, because you can feel it. You can feel it in the air. The tide's turning. 7 months ago, we had 0 operational drug consumption sites in the province. 6 months ago, we had 1. Last week, we had 1. Now we're at 2. Then we were at 2. Now we're potentially going to be at 14 or 15 within a month.
And what communities are these going? Like, this not in Saskatoon. This must be all over the province.
Yeah, so we got our OBS at the COVID hotels, and then we got our safe consumption site in Pleasant Hill, and then you're going to have Regina operating their OPS, and then wherever there's a COVID isolation hotel, there's going to be an overdose prevention site.
Okay.
Yeah. So anywhere that there's a COVID isolation hotel, there's going to be an overdose prevention site.
And the government is funding those.
I have no idea. The health authority is funding ours right now at the Saskatoon hotel.
Okay.
So our Saskatoon hotel site gets funding for staff, and then our Pleasant Hill site doesn't have any. But
Right.
it's these baby steps, but you can feel the momentum turning. Like Saskatchewan, when we do something, we got to do it the best. And I think that when we start to really tackle the overdose crisis, we're going to be the best at it. And I'm really excited for that day. I think our agency has a really balanced approach on dealing with this. We deal with community safety, we deal with the social, we deal with the cultural. Like we have cultural supports available to our clientele, and we have a lot of connections with churches in the community. And so I think our holistic approach and the way that we're dealing with this as a province is going to be awesome in a couple of years. It's just we need to push the government to the point where they need to realize this is the responsibility to deal with. They can't keep offloading health services onto small businesses or private donors.
Yeah. So what do you what do you think the government is spending the money on that could very well have gone to Prairie harm?
Well, the fucking first one is for sure that awareness campaign. $500,000 on a provincial awareness campaign on the overdose. Fuck,
I feel like you're doing a pretty good job at that for like free.
Yeah, give me $5,000. I'll give you the best fucking media plan you can do. Like we got a good idea for an awareness campaign that we're going to be rolling out in the next couple of months, and I think we're going to show that we can do a cost-effective, better media strategy that's going to have more people talking than anything the government is going to be able to implement. We know how to mobilize, and part of being a advocacy campaign or awareness campaign is you got to get in people's faces, and you got to make the issue undeniable, and you got to make it controversial. So that's our specialty. We're going to be able to do it.
Got another question coming in. What supports are there in the safe consumption site to help move people out of drug use and into abstinence-based recovery without judgment?
Yeah, so our goal is not abstinence-based recovery. If that's the individual's goal, we'll help them with that. But if it's not their goal, maybe their goal is reducing their use. Right. And so for us when we're working with folks, we talk to people about the issues that they're dealing with. And so on site, we have over $1 million in outreach budget. And so we have outreach staff coming out the wazoo, including peer supports, and we hire people that access services with us to deliver services. And this isn't like we give them a gift card or an honorarium. They're paid at the same rate as the rest of the staff. Their job title isn't peer, whatever, it's support worker or family support worker or, whatever position they're in. We don't label them as peers because they might want to go seek a job outside of our agency at some point. And so all of our staff have similar or same job title and then same pay. And so when people are coming into the site, we have our outreach teams that we work with them on their goals. So a lot of times we're trying to get them housing to start. Might be they need to get connected with a medical professional. And then maybe they're getting on some sort of opiate agonist therapy, whether it's methadone or Suboxone or those types of things. We're very lucky that, we have Dr. Markington and his crew next door to us. And so we can get them over there. And, if we call them, they're over in a pinch. Right. But the other thing is we're not in our site. We also have a clinical swing space. So we have an office that's opened up to other service providers. So once a week right now, we get the health authority that comes in and does COVID testing. Twice a week, we have a mental health nurse from Westside Clinic that comes in and does engagement with clientele to help them with mental health supports. Because a lot of times people haven't been able to deal with their mental health supports. And so it's really key for us to be able to support people in that journey. And then we also have the Saskatoon Sexual Health that comes in and does HIV testing, Hep C testing, and treatment twice a week. And so to helping people deal with, an infection that they have is major for helping them in their health journey. And then we also have cultural supports available. So, access to smudge, access to sweat, access to ceremony is a big one. And then the employment initiatives. I can't say my big push for the next while is employment initiatives for the folks that we're working with. They need something to do during the day often, and they need a productive environment to be around, and they need to feel like they're contributing to society. And when they, if they're on an naloxone training team, they definitely are. That our naloxone team, which is all people with lived experience, either past or current, they're the number one naloxone distribution team in the city. They distribute over 70% of the naloxone kits for all of Saskatoon.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it shows that peer-based support model works and can work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's part of that journey, is that connecting them to other service providers as well. We're here to stabilize, help them down that case management, help them get more stable in their life, and then deal with the supports as they need to. But, we've had it everywhere from somebody accessing services with us, you never thought they would, to completing post-secondary. Now they work in the sector, and you would never know that they were a former client of ours. We also have people on staff, full-time, part-time, that used to access services with us. And, they're, I think the employment thing is probably one of the biggest things that we could do for folks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I never came to you for services, but I myself am an example of accessing services and then turning it all around. I mean, I lived I was homeless, and I turned it around, and I accessed services, and I got the help I needed, and here we are. So this isn't addiction is not a dead end road.
No, and it's a lifelong journey, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think sometimes people want well, how many people did you get sober in the last 3 months? Well, fuck, man, addictions is a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to take time with each person to help them get down that journey. And in order to do that, we got to keep them alive first and foremost.
Right. But okay, so someone comes into Prairie Harm, and they are seeking an abstinence-based lifestyle. Now, whatever the steps that takes for them, but you can open doors for them in that way.
Yeah, of course. Either connecting them to, like, obviously there's NA and AA, but I don't think, well, maybe during COVID, getting to meetings is a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
When you don't have supports, but NA and AA are supports, and other are churches, like we don't talk about a lot, but like the faith community has been really good at supporting us. Like, we just started an awareness campaign on Rock 102 Radio in Saskatoon, and I can't remember their sister station in Regina, around talking to people about addictions. And we did that with the partnership with Circle Drive Alliance Church. And so really trying to connect people into community is a big one. But then, counseling is a big factor. Like, I think addictions counseling is another big factor. I think a lot of people need those types of connections, and they don't necessarily trust service providers. And so we can be that bridge to trust, and then also do check-ins. A lot of times people might go to an addictions counselor, and then first, when you hear back from them, oh, that person's an asshole. Oh, is that person an asshole? Or are they like helping you deal with things that you don't really want to deal with?
Or did they just get honest?
Yeah, exactly. And so, and then, having that conversation with, like, you're right. They aren't an asshole. They were doing the thing I need them to do for me, but they need sometimes that sounding board, and I think that's where having a long-time support network like ours plays into that. And, we've had it, sometimes we're working with people for years. Other times it's a one-time touchstone. They just needed us to direct them down into a different path or to a different door. And we're okay with that. If we're working with somebody for a long time, great. If we're working for them for a short duration, that's great too. Like, it's different strokes for different folks. You can't have a one size fits all policy, when you're working with individuals, especially like you're talking about people with different backgrounds, different substance uses, different personal histories, it all comes into play.
Yeah. Sorry, I just about covered up both of our faces there with Kathy's comment.
Oh, of course.
So, okay. I believe there is so much misunderstanding about Prairie Harm Reduction Center and all the services offered there. And I believe, Kathy, you're correct. It's not only about helping them use safely. What can caring citizens of Saskatoon do to help educate?
Well, I think the big one is get trained on naloxone. And if you own a business, carry naloxone at your business, but also just having it in your medicine cabinet like you would if, as an AED or a first aid kit. I think that goes a lot. Yeah.
Interesting thing. I found this out the other day. If you would like to advocate to have naloxone kits put into standard first aid kits, advocate to the CSA. They are the ones who mandate what goes into first aid kits on job sites and in places of employment and things like that. That's correct? Is it not?
I wouldn't know. I'm not 100% on that.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
Yeah, we have businesses though that are starting to come around. Like I think Broadway Theater now carries an naloxone kit.
Yeah.
We're going over to Migos next week to get them a naloxone kit.
Hard Knox Talks carries a naloxone kit.
That is good news. And so we're trying to get them in as many places as we can. Naloxone access isn't as great as we think it should be in Saskatchewan. Shouldn't matter what pharmacy you go to. You should be able to get a kit for free. Doesn't matter your background, substance user identified or not. We think it should be available to everybody for free. If you do live in Saskatoon and you want a free kit, you just call us. We'll come train up all your staff, your family, your friends, whoever, and we'll give you all a kit for free.
Claudia, that's the Canadian Standard Association.
Yeah, so with I think naloxone for breaking stigma is one of the biggest ones. The other is sharing articles and allowing the comment section to kind of work itself out. You know, you're going to have sharing articles around addictions in the prairies is important. It's a conversation we need to have. You know, normally I'd say it's a dinner table conversation. That's a little tough when most places are starting to go into, you know, you can't leave your house or be outside or be around people or whatever. And so, but you know, it's having it on your social media and talking people through why you think it's important to offer these types of services is major. You know, and then educating yourself as well. I think our social media is a good platform, especially our Instagram. We use a good blend of humor, seriousness, articles,
swear words,
a lot of swearing. I think that you know, my mom keeps telling me I need to stop with the cussing. I told her
my mom said that to me last week. She's like, "You said the F word on the show." I'm like, I know I did. I'm gonna do it again.
My dad had too strong of an influence on me growing up. That's what I say. But you know, I think kind of being in your face and unapologetic is important, but then also having those one-to-one conversations, you know, really goes a long way. Like on our Instagram, on our IGTV page on our Instagram, you know, a student did a really, really good short doc on the addictions crisis in Saskatoon. You know, and I think we're going to be looking to do more of those types of initiatives that are more community education. And then, you know, I think one of the biggest things you could do is follow Moms Stop the Harm. These are moms who have lost kids to the addictions crisis and the overdose crisis. And you know, anytime I need to know if we're crossing the line or not going hard enough or just need some sagely advice, I always go to Marie, you know, who's, you know, one of the main people in Saskatoon. But
I talk to Marie weekly.
Yeah. And I look to see what the OGs did, you know, and so what's Mom Stop the Harm doing? Well, they're talking a lot of shit and they're not taking any shit. Okay, that maybe should be our approach. You know?
And they're fostering change.
Big time. Yeah. And I think if being polite would have got us through this addictions crisis, we would have fucking been done and over with it a long time ago. But it's clearly not. And so we got to take lessons from the 1980s and 1990s AIDS movement. They got social change because they went to the streets and they demanded it. You're not gonna get government's response. Their government's not gonna pay for shit if you ask nicely. I think we've proven that. You know, 2 years in a row, we've asked them politely for funding. 2 years in a row, they told us no. So, okay, so now we're going to stop pretending like being nice is going to get us what we want. Now we're going to get in your face. We're going to mobilize. We're going to get a lot more people, a lot more angry than they are about this issue. And so, you know, maybe it's not the worst thing in the long run because clearly the community has stepped up and showing that this is an election issue for a lot of people in this province. And I think the elected officials need to know that because, you know, they tiptoed around it at the election when they came up in the leadership debate. What did Scott Moe say? We're exploring, we're open to funding safe consumption sites in the province. Well, they've had the opportunity now 2 years in a row and they didn't. And so they're going to have to fund us sooner than later. If they don't, it's going to be a joke. Like you can't tell us that the sites are needed in hotels and then not tell us that they're needed in the community that's hardest hit by it. Yeah.
So let's talk about the evidence. There's all this talk in the news that there's all of this evidence supporting your case as to why you should be funded and how much money and, you know, not only the lives that will be saved and the lives that will be changed for the better, but the money, the tax dollars that the government would save by investing in Prairie Harm and organizations like it.
Yeah, so, you know, Zach at the Star Phoenix did a really good job of getting a Freedom of Information request around the documents around the Ministry of Health's own internal reporting around their analysis of our safe consumption site. You can hear my cat's not happy.
What's the cat's name?
RuPaul.
RuPaul, be quiet.
So just give me 1 second here. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, no, he's like, yeah, harm reduction. Woo.
with the evidence around the safe consumption site, we have it so that their own internal documents showed that they were going to save money from allowing us to operate. We were going to save lives, and we weren't going to actually increase the crime rate in the neighborhood. And so
now, why would so I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but why would the crime rate go up with a safe consumption site?
It wouldn't, but they tried to build that narrative. And even in the government's reporting, they said, we saw there was a petition that went around when we first were trying to open, 3,000 signatures on the petition to support it. Prairie Harm Reduction has 3,000 signatures of people living in the city that want to support their safe consumption site. And then there was a little note that said there is a small but vocal minority that are opposed to it. Well, we don't know if that's one person, 10 people, 20 people, but they give in to those voices a lot of the time because they give out stigma-based doomsday scenarios. You know, we had organizations. We had one organization that came out opposed to us, and they said they're going to create a really dangerous environment for the kids in the neighborhood. Well, that hasn't happened. We've created a safer environment for the kids in the neighborhood. You know, crime hasn't gone up around our building. The police have shown that, their own police data shows that. And so, but with the cost savings, you know, there was a study done in 2015 on a sample of a safe consumption site operating in Saskatoon. We were going to prevent 15 HIV infections a year with the safe consumption site operating on similar hours to ours. Well, that's over $18 million in saving because over the course of those people's lifetime, because for each HIV infection we prevent for that person alone, it's $1.3 million over the course of their lifetime in medical costs that we just saved the provincial government. Not to mention Hep C. We can treat Hep C, and we're treating people with Hep C through Saskatoon Sexual Health right now in our clinic. And so they, you know, every person that they treat for Hep C, you know, they're stopping the spread of Hep C in the community because that person gets cleared and cured of Hep C. Not to mention we're preventing hospitalizations, so we're preventing people from having to be hospitalized for overdoses because we can prevent these overdoses from happening. And you know, we have a very small amount of overdoses that happen in our facility, and the reason we have a very small of overdoses happen is because we teach people safer drug use habits so that they do use, and they do use in a safer manner. And one of the biggest ways is they take their time. So they're not, if you ever seen somebody using in a bathroom, or know somebody's using public washroom or in a park or an alley, they don't know if they're going to get the opportunity to use those drugs again. So they take all their drugs at once. They slam everything they got. That creates a really high chance for overdose. But in our facility, we say, you know, just try a little bit, go slow. You can always add more if you need to later. But if you added, there's a good chance you're going to overdose. So if you add a little bit now, and so they can gauge their use. So we're teaching people how to use in a safer manner in our facility. And so because of that, that means when an overdose happens, really rarely in our facility, we don't usually have to call EMS. And if we're able to prevent a first responder call, that means police aren't having to respond, fire isn't having to respond, and EMS isn't having to respond. So and that's what happens in a community.
How much do you think the city is spending in a year right now responding to drug-related calls that could easily be prevented with a safe consumption site?
Exorbitant amounts, like exorbitant amounts. The Mercredi used to release a weekly ticker tape on the amount of overdoses. Mercredi is the ambulance service in Saskatoon. They used to release a weekly ticker tape on overdoses that were happening in the city. In 2018 we had like 205 overdoses in the entire city. They were dealing when they stopped releasing the ticker tape, which was last August. We were up to I think 130 or 150 overdoses a week in the city that Mercredi was responding to, and they don't even get to all of them because sometimes it's just fire or just police at them. And so that gives you an idea of how frequent this is happening in the community. And there's no follow-up with engagement after these folks overdose. There's no post-analysis. There's no case management. There's no addiction services that follow up. These people just overdose. They get stabilized. They either get brought to the hospital or they don't. Often if they get brought to the hospital, they immediately leave the hospital. Almost no follow-up. Versus in our facility where we can provide that immediate case management to people. We had a person overdose in the facility yesterday. You know, we had to give him 27 shots in a lock zone. We were doing chest compressions, valve bag mask on their face. You know, it was crazy. Well, we did follow-up case management almost all day today. Kate, our director of support services, our new director of support services, was doing case management with that person to try to get them housing, to get them mental health support, get them back connected with the community, because we can provide that type of follow-up in our facility. And so the city is spending exorbitant amounts of money, and the province is happy because they get to wash their hands of it, because it falls on fire budgets and police budgets, not health budgets. So they're happy to let the situation continue because they don't have to pay for it. But the city taxpayers are paying for it right now, which is why they need to be, shouting at the provincial government that this is their responsibility to deal with, because health is not a city responsibility, it's a provincial responsibility. Yeah, okay, so the drug testing question. So we're in talks right now with a company to get a mini mass spectrometer on our site. And so we're hoping that we can get one as soon as possible. Fentanyl testing strips are definitely an option right now. And so we might get fentanyl testing strips in the short term, but our goal is to get a mass spec on site. They have them available in Vancouver. I want to be the best at whatever the fuck we're doing in drug testing. I want to be the best at that. So right now we're in talks with a company to get a mass spec in the city. But we would like to get two. We'd like to get one for our facility, and then we want to get a second one for when music festivals start up again, so that we could take it to Nest Creek. We could take it to, the country, what's it called now?
Nest Creek. I got some stories.
But big country thunder. Like, we want to be able to take it to these music festivals to do drug testing at the facility at those music festivals. We know Coke's done. We know MDMA's done. We know all these drugs are done at these music festivals, so we should be able to test people's drug purity to make sure that they're not at risk of overdosing. And luckily at Nest Creek we have Safer Nest that's set up, but we want to be able to go there with our drug testing equipment. And so, we're looking to get these types of services up and running as quickly as possible. If we would have got provincial funding, I think we would have been we would have been offering drug testing like next week, but because of it, we had to make sure that we had enough money to pay staff first. And so now we're starting down that track around the drug testing.
Yeah. So these documents, these internal government documents that are being talked about, that the government knows that the reality of it. Where can I see these documents? Where can I find them?
You can't because they're all embargoed or
what's embargoed?
Embargoed means you can't share it around. So if you get a copy, you're on a list. You can't share the copy with anybody.
Why?
Post media, I don't know. I think it's better to have an informed public on these issues. Post media has copies of them. I think they're doing stories on them as we speak. And so, follow Star Phoenix for sure, and CBC and all the different media outlets, because more and more they're getting media savvy and they're getting the information out there. And I think it's showing that an informed public cares, and that's our biggest goal, is to make sure the people know that this is happening. For months, for almost a year now, we've been calling for, a press conference similar to they do to COVID on the addictions crisis, to talk about all the ways that they're succeeding and all the ways that they're failing. But the provincial government still hasn't done that, and I think it's because they know the answer is that they're failing on this file. And so we want to see some real movement, and we want to hold them accountable. And the only measure right now is how many people are dying, and they're failing that one in a major way. And we're, I think that said, if they turn the ships in the right direction, we're going to be able to deal with this in a really positive way. And I think sometimes people forget that, when we were at Saskatoon, we used to hold press conferences with the provincial government continually. Like, we were a part of their media strategy for rolling out. We wrote most of their good policies to get a handle on the HIV crisis. And we worked very closely with the provincial government. We want to be able to do that again, but we're not going to allow double speak or sunshine and lollipops talk when it comes to this issue, because people are dying on droves, and it's not okay. A lot of times we're getting messaging from families who are, they're wondering why nobody's speaking out on these issues. And we're pretty hopeful that this is going to become a major issue for the province, that they're going to put some money behind and deal with it in a proactive way that's not just ideologically based on the Just Say No campaigns of the 1980s.
So with since your launch in October, with your $0 budget, how many overdoses have you stopped? How many lives have you saved?
Well, we've had hundreds upon hundreds of people in our facility. We've only had one since then. We've had 2 overdoses on site, both we successfully reversed, but we've had other overdoses that we've been able to reverse just by offering oxygen. So we don't have to administer naloxone. So those don't get logged as an overdose because we can see that they're starting to nod out. We get them on some oxygen and it stabilizes them. We learned that from Toronto, from Moss Park in Toronto, that you don't always have to have the the emergency room, crazy everything happening. If you can be proactive in preventing it and also providing that drug use education right from the start, it goes. We've had a number of overdoses after hours on our facility, and we've had 12 clients die from overdoses while we've been closed, which has probably been the biggest fucking piss off. You know, last week we lost a guy that I've worked with since the first day I walked in the building. You know,
because you weren't open.
Yeah,
nobody was around.
He used the facility most days that we were open, and he's a good person. Like, you know, he's a friend.
We've got.
You know,
sorry. Yeah.
No, it's shitty, man. And it's like this shit happens all the time, and nobody fucking does anything about it. It's a piss off.
Yeah, man. It's pretty real, isn't it? So we've got Tanner here with a question. I think we already touched a little bit on it, but
yeah. So some are, yeah, and if they are, we connect them with addiction services and treatment centers and those types of things. We try our best to get people connected as quickly as possible. It doesn't matter if we're trying to get them housing, social assistance, justice support, or addiction support. When people say they're ready to move on something, we'll fucking move mountains to get them it. You know, and you know, I think we're all dealing with the reduction in treatment beds in the province, just from the COVID restrictions around spacing and those types of things. But
and then Pine Lodge burnt down.
Yeah, and Pine Lodge burnt down, and so the addictions beds that got announced this year are basically a Pine Lodge replacement. And so, you know, it is what it is. But at this point, yeah, we do have people that ask for addiction support, and you know, we're well versed. Like a number of our staff are in recovery. I'd say a lot of our staff are in recovery, and so we know how to get people connected and get them down that path. You know, I think it goes to we also have people who are still in active use on staff, and I think that goes to having a good mix, because you know, the game changes frequently, especially now. The drug game changes really frequently. The drug game is different than it was a year ago, and so we have a good mix on staff. But yeah, if somebody wants help on treatment, you know, we'll get them to where they need to go.
So what else have you stopped? We were talking that you have sort of stepped in on keeping people safe on other levels, from domestic, from different kinds of violence and things like that.
Yeah, so our outreach teams, you know, especially our family support team, they keep a lot of kids safe, like a lot of kids. Yeah. You know, and a lot of times it's poverty related. You know, it's just people don't have a safe place to live, so they have to fucking live in a shitty rundown house or shitty rundown apartment, or in a apartment building, not through no fault of their own. That gets trapped out from a gang, and then they need to get out and they need to find that. And so you know, those women, they're at work right now. They work till midnight, and they're going into places that, you know, most people won't go into, and they do so safely. And so that's a big way that we keep people safe, is through our family support team. Another way is you know, even at the consumption site, we had somebody come through and they for sure would have lost their foot, like through sepsis. And they didn't want to engage with anybody, but, you know, we got to call Westside. They would agree to see the doctor or the nurse in our facility. And so we called Westside. They came over from next door. They were able to treat the person, convince the person to go to the emergency room to get them their leg treated and on some antibiotics. And as a result, they didn't lose their leg. You know, and so that's sadly becoming the norm. We have a lot of people with infections in the community, you know, and not to mention the abscesses, the abscesses that we deal with. So if you don't know, an abscess is basically if you use injection drugs and you don't use new equipment every time and clean the space through, you know, washing or alcohol swabs, bacteria gets in there, and eventually it turns into, you know, it can turn into quite the wound. And then endocarditis happens, where it's an infection that goes on your brain, your spinal column, or your heart valve, and you're in hospital for up to, you know, 6 months. And so we catch a lot of those cases early, and so we treat the people. So we, you know, test our paramedic, treats their wound, changes bandages, does follow up, and then also convinces a lot of people to seek out medical help that they normally would not seek out, but they trust tests or paramedic. And so they'll go seek out medical help. And then like we had one guy who was being chased by gang members. Never met the fucking dude in my whole life. He ran into our facility and we were able to keep him safe. They were trying to shoot him. That was a number of months ago, but he ran into our facility and we were able to lock the door and then keep him safe. Police were able to respond and deal with it, guns and gangs and that type of thing. But this is just a random that just came on off the street. And so we're doing that type of thing all the time. Not like, and it's not even just like this all intense shit. Like during the pandemic, all the services closed down across the city. There was no public washroom for people who were street involved to use. Thanks to the community foundation in Saskatoon here, we were able to open up a public washroom. We had a woman that, wasn't able to change her tampon. Like, fuck, that's so fucking sad. And, it's just shit you don't think about. And she could have had that tampon in there for weeks. Or a week. And so then it's like, but we could provide her, United Way gives us feminine hygiene products or, menstrual products. And so we were able to provide them the menstrual products in a space that they could do something as fucking simple as changing their pad or their tampon. Like the issues that are in the community are so severe, and providing that safe space and telling people that, no, these people do belong here, it goes a long way, because otherwise they'd be, we saw they get kicked to the curb and, they're at risk for COVID amongst other things. And so, and even the fact that we provide COVID screening, and it's not just us, like Lighthouse does it, like Salvation Army, the Comfy, like there's places all over the city that provide this COVID screening, but the health authority has shown to be really proactive on trying to address these health inequities with our population. And so, kudos to the health authority and the health leadership that we have for being it. We just need the elected officials to start ponying up for things like the consumption site or, actually housing.
Well, man, we have one more question coming in here, and then we are going to let you get back to your evening.
That's good. Yeah, I think the Crystal Meth Treatment Center in Estevan is, it's a good thing. Like we're the chair of the crystal meth working group with the Safer Community Action Alliance here in Saskatoon. We asked for a safer crystal meth treatment center. Estevan probably wouldn't have been the community that I thought would have got it. I think just capacity wise, but also accessibility wise. Like if you're in Larange and you have a crystal meth addiction, or you're in Hudson Bay and you got a crystal meth addiction, Estevan's a long, long way away. I think it would have made sense to have it in Prince Albert, Saskatoon, or Regina. You could maybe even argue for North Battleford, but I think it might have made sense to have it a little bit more central. But we're happy that we have a crystal meth treatment center, because the opioid crisis is raging, but so is the crystal meth crisis, and we need a place to treat people. Where I think the problem that we fall into is when you act like treatment centers are the only way to get through this crisis. When you have record amounts of people dying, if treatment centers were going to stop the amount of people from dying that we're seeing, then they would have already. We need a balanced approach, and we need a full spectrum of care, and harm reduction is a part of that. And I think, sometimes people think, harm reductionists are against treatment centers or abstinence-based approaches. Like I'm drinking water tonight. Cheers. Like I'm a teetotaler. We have a lot of staff that are in recovery. We know that abstinence can work for people, but it doesn't work for everybody. And that's where that full spectrum of care comes into play. But yeah, I think the dedicated crystal meth treatment center is the shit. Like we're one of the only places in Canada that has one. Like good. Okay, now what's next? Like, but you're not going to get away with these like piecemeal investments. We need a major influx of investment in this to deal with it properly, so that it's not the AIDS crisis from the 2010s. I want us to be ahead of the addictions crisis. I don't want to get caught so far behind that it's going to be a hole that we're not going to be able to dig ourselves out of.
Yeah. Okay, man. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us here with tonight?
Just that if you do want to support us, donations are great, but so are social media follows. And then our new merch line is coming out next Thursday at 8 a.m. Sask time. If you want it, you really do need to get on at 8 a.m. We're expecting to sell it really fast. Our first clothing line we sold out, I think in 2 months. Our second clothing line we sold out in about 6 hours. And so we're expecting to sell out much faster this time. And so if you want to support us and you don't want to donate, but maybe you want a t-shirt or a tank top or, one of the items that we're going to be launching, follow us on social media, and we're going to be dropping that stuff pretty fast.
Cool, man. Okay, well, Jason, thank you very much for allowing this platform to help you carry your message. I will let you get back to your evening. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we will see you all next week right here on Hard Knox Talks.
Thanks
Good
for having
night.
me.